You call it shyness, as if it were a quiet preference. But what if the silence you carry isn't natural? What if it's engineered? Every withdrawn glance, every swallowed word, every anxious heartbeat may not belong to you at all, but to the ghosts of those who raised you. You've mistaken emotional absence for peace. You've mistaken avoidance for safety. And the more you search for confidence, the deeper you return to the cage that built your restraint. You didn't choose to be quiet. You learned it. Every time your parents sighed instead of listening, every time their attention dissolved when you spoke, your nervous system made a note. Speaking leads to disconnection. Over years, your voice became a threat to your own safety. Now you call it introversion, but it's not temperament, it's conditioning. Your silence is a scar shaped like personality. You've mistaken suppression for stability because your earliest lessons equated self-expression with loss. You were trained to disappear gracefully, to turn every impulse inward, to apologize for existing too loudly. But if this silence was never really you, then who exactly have you been protecting all this time? You built walls without realizing it. They started as defenses' subtle flinches when a tone sharpened, small hesitations before answering a question. Over time, these became architecture. Careful pauses, controlled expressions, emotional distance disguised as composure. You thought you were being mature, thoughtful, reserved. But really, you were practicing emotional invisibility, mirroring the cold quiet that once surrounded you. Your parents didn't have to tell you to withdraw. They simply modeled it. Their discomfort became your blueprint for intimacy, their silence your language. You mistake solitude for choice because you've forgotten how coercion feels when it's disguised as love. If your calm is nothing more than fear perfected, then what happens when the fear is gone? You learned early that quiet children cause fewer problems. Each time you stayed still, the air stayed safe. Each time you swallowed a feeling, you were rewarded with less conflict, with temporary peace, with approval that felt like warmth, but was really just relief. You mistook their calm for affection. You learned that invisibility earned stability, that shrinking kept the chaos contained. Over years, you began to crave that numb safety, confusing obedience with emotional intelligence. You called it being low maintenance. They called it being a good kid. But it was really the art of erasing yourself to be tolerated. If love required your disappearance, then what part of you still believes being seen is dangerous? Your voice isn't the only thing that learned to hide. Your body did too. The tight shoulders, the shallow breath, the constant hum beneath your skin, they're not anxiety appearing from nowhere. They're the residue of years spent bracing for emotional impact that never visibly arrived. You internalized every unspoken tension, every withheld affection, and stored them in muscle and marrow. When you enter a room, your body still scans for tone shifts, for disappointment disguised as quiet. You think you're calm because you're still, but your stillness is just containment. Even your heartbeat whispers, "Don't disturb the peace dot." If your body could finally exhale, would you still recognize the person it releases? You learned who you were through reflection, but your mirrors were fogged. Your parents' faces gave no recognition, no attunement, only vague approval when you stayed small enough not to need anything. So you built your identity around their absence, mistaking neglect for neutrality. The quiet between you became proof of peace when it was really proof of distance. You grew skilled at reading emptiness, interpreting every pause, every look, as a coded message you needed to decode to stay safe. Now, when someone offers warmth, it feels wrong, too bright, too invasive, too foreign. If you are never mirrored, how do you know which version of yourself is real? You call it independence. They called it strength. But underneath, it was just emotional isolation, wearing a mask of maturity. You learned that needing others led to disappointment. That vulnerability was met with absence. That self-reliance was the only way to feel in control. So you built a private logic. If no one can reach me, no one can hurt me. That logic became your personality. You confused detachment with peace, solitude with self-knowledge. But isolation doesn't protect, it calcifies. You've been mistaking numbness for wisdom, mistaking disconnection for enlightenment. You became your own parent, your own witness, your own cage. If no one is allowed close enough to harm you, then who's close enough to truly know you? You still chase the sound of their approval, though you'd never admit it. It echoes in every accomplishment, every polished sentence, every quiet act of perfection. You learned that love arrives only when you've earned it and disappears the moment you rest. So you keep proving your worth through controlling outcomes, emotions, even your silence. The need for validation has become invisible, like oxygen. You don't notice it, but you suffocate without it. When someone praises you now, you feel nothing but dread, because approval once meant temporary safety, not affection. And safety never lasted. If every success is just another plea to be seen, then what happens when there's no one left to see you? You say you want connection, but when it comes near, your chest tightens. You retreat into analysis, humor, distraction, anything to avoid exposure. Intimacy feels like standing under a harsh light, naked in ways you can't explain. Because being known once meant being judged, corrected, or ignored. You learned that transparency invites danger. So now, even when someone asks gently, "What's wrong?" you translate it as intrusion. You keep your truth folded, hidden beneath layers of politeness and half smiles. You've built an entire identity around being unreadable, safe in your ambiguity. If being understood feels unbearable, then what kind of loneliness have you mistaken for protection? Your parents never said you were too much, but their silence said it for them. Every withdrawn glance, every sigh after you spoke too honestly, carved the message deeper. Your emotions are burdens. You internalized it as fluency. Now, shame speaks through you like a second language. It shapes every apology, every hesitation, every moment you downplay your pain. You call it humility, but it's self-erasure disguised as grace. Shame taught you to manage perception rather than express truth, to control how you are seen instead of who you are. It became the grammar of your personality. If shame is the only language you're fluent in, how can you ever tell the truth without translating yourself away? You've become addicted to fading. Every room you enter, every conversation you temper, every thought you swallow reinforces the pattern. Withdrawal has become a habit stronger than desire, and isolation a reward you don't question. You confuse invisibility with safety, absence with control, silence with wisdom. Each day you practice the same erasure, believing it protects you when it only entrenches the void. You've learned to disappear even from yourself, losing track of what belongs to you and what was imposed. The line between survival and surrender is gone, and you can't tell what you're practicing. If your absence feels natural, then what part of you has ever truly existed? This is the part you've called introversion, the gentle quiet that made you feel different, unique, safe. But now you see it for what it really is, a mausoleum built from your parents' silence. Every pause, every hesitation, every calm response is a ghost of their emotional absence replaying itself through you. You've mistaken trauma for temperament, protection for identity. You've lived so long behind the glass that you've started to think the reflection is the world. You call your quiet a personality, but it's really just the echo of your own extinction rehearsed, perfectly dot when the silence finally cracks. And it will you recognize the sound that escapes your mouth as a scream or as your first breath?